Avery came to stand beside them, and Chiti rested her head against her shoulder automatically. Avery stiffened. Her method of hiding the smell of her new habit only worked from a safe distance. "Since when do you chew gum?" asked Chitty mildly. "I can hear your jaw clicking." "I'll spit it out," Avery said quickly, practically leaping away from her. "Dude, she doesn't drink or do drugs," said Vish. "Let her at least have some gum." "You know I don't either," said Chitty with a light laugh. "But that's because you don't like it," he said. Whereas Avery loved it, said Avery as she spat the wad into the bin. "But Chitty's right, it's a bad habit." Chitty frowned very slightly. "I didn't say that," she said. "Hey, Avery, Chitty told me what day it is," Vish said, rubbing the back of his neck with visible discomfort. "And I'm really sorry about Nikki. My, condolences." "Thanks," said Avery, giving him a soft punch in the arm. "But I'm fine." Chitty gave her a knowing look. "You know what I say about fine." "For therapists, fine is a 4-letter word," intoned Avery. "But I actually am." "I'm just saying you don't have to be fine with us," said Chitty, her voice soft. "You're family." "I know," said Avery more forcefully than she'd meant to. "Uh-oh," said Vish, pointing toward the screen. "A new lamb to the slaughter." The camera panned through the audience to a young Indian man in glasses. A microphone on a boom was thrust in front of him, and he reached to steady it, running his other hand through his hair self-consciously. "My friends and I often zealously debate the best Oscar-winning docs." He smiled with affected impatience. "Though we have yet to reach a satisfying consensus. I dare to think that you too have these kinds of pub conversations." He cleared his throat. "So my question is, which was your favorite from this year's lineup, and why?" "Oh shit," said Vish. The camera returned to Ganishka's face, which was hardening with frustration. "I don't have these pub conversations, as you call them, because I don't think about art in this way. It does films a great disservice to think of them hierarchically. Awards are a capitalist model for creativity. I put zero store in such accolades, though I may have won several of them." "Couldn't resist slipping that in," murmured Chiti. "In fact," continued Ganishka, clearly warming up to this line of thought, "I have been asked many times to sit on prize committees, and it is my habit to refuse in all cases. They are bad for filmmakers, create bad politics in the industry, and represent entrenched marketing strategies that are outdated. I don't need a committee, in most cases majority male, to micturate." Ganishka paused with satisfaction after enunciating this word. "On my work to prove its value," she concluded. "I strongly question any authority that presents itself as a deciding body in the arts, and I advise you and your friends to do the same." The squinting young man, visibly chastened, sat back down. "Ah, man," said Vish. "She's not wrong," said Avery. "Yeah, but these are, like, Mum's fans. She could be a bit nicer to them." "I think they like it," said Avery. "She's like their dom." "Disturbing," said Chiti. "But accurate," said Vish. Next, a timid white woman wearing dangly plastic fruit earrings rose and took the microphone. "Hi, first of all, I just wanted to thank you for changing my life." Groans from Chiti and Vish. "My question is simple. What moments in your life give you solace?" Ganishka nodded and gently closed her eyes like a cat who has been tickled in the right spot. "That is a good question," she purred, and the woman flushed with pleasure. "Have you ever noticed how much Mum closes her eyes when she speaks?" asked Vish. "It's like what she's saying is so true she can hardly stand to bear witness to it with all her senses." "To be fair, I think she may have just forgotten her glasses," said Chiti. Sometimes, Avery saw Chiti's desire to love her mother breach the surface of her disdain like a seal cub peeking its head above the ocean. The problem with Ganishka was that you never knew if you were going to get cuddled or clubbed. "A moment that comes to me now," Ganishka was saying solemnly, "is the sensation of putting my cheek on my dog's tummy. I have 2 of them, and one has a considerable tummy." The audience laughed, in part to relieve the tension from the previous question, in part for the gift of hearing one of the fiercest living cinematic minds say the word tummy so seriously. "Both of them used to be strays," she continued. One of them, her mother, was killed by a car on the road outside my house. She was so small when I found her that I had to feed her with a pipette. Shiti released an involuntary snort. Yet she didn't believe in breastfeeding us. The other dog I stole, said Ganishka with a proud shrug. She was tied to a tree night and day near my home, and one day I just took her. I feel it is my duty to liberate the unloved. A murmur of approval rustled through the crowd as Shiti snapped the laptop shut. That's enough of that, she said. Avery checked her face for signs of hurt, but she appeared unruffled. I'm hungry. You staying for dinner, Vishnoodle? He spun around on the island stool and emitted a loud sigh toward the ceiling. I'm too heartbroken to eat, he said. What's this? Asked Avery. The new love of Vish's life, said Chiti, smiling. Avery turned to inspect the contents of their large fridge. Ah, and when did you meet this new love? She asked. Last night. So it's serious, she said. She removed a bunch of wilted cilantro from the top shelf and tossed it in the bin. She had never been much of a cook, and when alone still considered cereal an adequate dinner. It is, defended Vish. She's cool, man. She knew all the words to Wu-Tang's Bring the Ruckus. That is cool, conceded Avery. Should we order from the Italian spot? There's perfectly good food in the fridge, said Chiti. I'll roast some veggies. I like Avery's idea better, said Vish. Anyway, I fucked it all up. I needed to text her something today that would make an impression. So what did you send her? Vish hung his head. It doesn't get more predictable, he said. More prosaic. Chiti inhaled sharply. It wasn't a picture of your penis, was it? Vish's head snapped back up. Woman, no, he yelled. Get your mind out of the gutter. Chiti offered an apologetic chuckle. What could be worse than a picture of your penis? Asked Avery. Hey, said Vish, feigning outrage. Avery raised her hands in apology. I was referring to the nature of the content, not the quality. We're sure your penis is perfect, Noodle, said Chiti. She looked at Avery and her eyes were dancing with amusement. Woman, cried Vish, you're my sister. Stop. So what was it? Avery asked, laughing. It can't be that bad. I said, Happy Thursday. He pushed his face back into the crook of his arm. The banality. I'll never hear from her again. Chiti rolled her eyes and rubbed Vish's back. This week, her long nails were painted a rhubarb pink. It's all right, she murmured. You'll get another chance. Tomorrow is a new day. Exactly, Avery grinned. You can text her TGIF. As Vish moaned with despair, Avery turned to pull her buzzing phone from her briefcase. Everything okay? Asked Chiti, catching her frown. It's from my sister. The hot one or the scary one? Asked Vish, visibly perking up. Chiti swatted at the back of his head. Don't be reductive, she said. You know their names. Bonnie Blue could snap me in half like a twiglet, said Vish. I'm saying scary with the utmost respect. The hot one and the scary one, repeated Avery. And the dead one, she thought. What does that make me? The boring one. Stable, darling, said Chiti cheerily. There's a difference. But Avery was not stable, not really. She was unraveling. It was just that no one knew it yet, not even, really, her. You're also the gay one, said Vish generously, if we're going purely by generalities. Chiti grabbed the back of his head and shook it. What has gotten into you? She tutted. Avery raised an eyebrow. Who says my sisters aren't gay too? You're just saying that because you're with this one, said Vish, wrapping his arm around his sister's waist. Who thinks everyone's gay? That's because they are, Chiti said. A little, at least. Yeah, Kinsey scale schminzy schmale, he said. I'm just saying, whatever part of me wants something put in my butt must be buried pretty deep because I'm certainly not aware of it. Much like your prostate, said Chiti brightly. Anyway, the answer to your question is lucky, said Avery. She wants to come stay. That's fantastic, exclaimed Chiti. You're always saying she should come. She's so close after all. Avery shook her head. Something's not right. What makes you say that? She wants to come soon, like tomorrow. Something must have happened in Paris. Or maybe she just heard about our fabulous guest room, which I have finally gotten around to painting. Chiti had been redoing the house a room at a time, each with its own color theme. She understood color like a language, one in which she was fluent, and Avery was still trying to catch the odd word. For instance, she'd told Avery, in Jaipur where her grandparents lived, there were 50 variations of blue and turquoise, each with its own name. Avery, by contrast, struggled to think of one. Chidi had chosen emerald for the walls of the guest room and covered the bed with linen sheets the color of rose quartz for contrast, transforming what had once been a rather poky office into a precious jewel box of a room. Avery felt that it was an apt analogy for Chitty's effect on her own life. "And why haven't I been invited to stay in this fabulous guest room?" asked Vish. "Because you live in London, silly boy," said Chitty. Vish cast his eyes around the kitchen, with its tasteful powder blue walls and gleaming metal appliances, the polished marble countertops, and large farmhouse sink complete with a separate sparkling water tap Avery had paid to install at great expense. "Not this London," he said. Later that night, Avery lay in their deep clawfoot bath listening to the radio. She didn't care what was on. She just needed some noise in the room to prevent her from being alone with her thoughts. This was something she remembered from early sobriety, how unbearable it felt to even brush her teeth without having something to distract her. She would blast the television while she showered, hold a hairdryer in one hand and a book in the other, scroll the news while she ate, and lie in bed with headphones piping music into her ears late into the night. Over time, however, her mind had become a more peaceful place. She had even been on meditation retreats, whole days spent simply being present with herself, paying attention to her breath, letting thoughts drift through her mind like clouds in a clear sky. Not anymore. Now, when she closed her eyes, she saw every mistake she had made leading up to this moment. Her inner weather, once calm, had become stormy again. Avery sank beneath the surface of the water and listened to the liquid murmurs around her ears. She stayed under for as long as she could, then burst forth, gasping for breath. When she opened her eyes, Chidi was standing above her. "Can I join you, or is this one of your solo baths?" "Of course you can." Chidi unbuttoned her pants and linen tunic and let them crumple around her feet. Her naked form, once so thrilling to Avery, was now as familiar as the furniture. Chitty unwound her waist-length black braid and twisted it into what she called a bedtime bun, a plump swirl on the top of her head. She had the kind of hair people stopped in the street to admire, its length a perpetual performance and party trick. Chitty was 39, almost 7 years Avery's senior, but from behind her hair gave the impression of someone either very young or very old, which was fitting given one of the earliest things Chitty had told Avery about herself. The first time they met, Chitty had sat across from her in her old therapy office, a notepad in her hands and her ankles crossed. It was Avery's first therapy session ever, and they had been talking for just under an hour. In answer to why she was there, Avery explained that she had kicked a heroin addiction, graduated from law school, and moved to London to join one of the most prestigious firms in the world, but she could not force herself to sleep at night. As they began to wrap up, Avery found, to her surprise, that she did not want the session to end. "Can I come again next week?" she asked. "I'd like you to, if you'd like to," said Chitty. "So you can help me?" Chitty nodded. "I think so. I'm not beyond help," Avery clarified. Chitty sat back in her chair and regarded her. "Can I tell you something personal? I don't usually talk about myself with clients, and I likely won't again, but I think it might be helpful for me to explain myself this way." Avery nodded. She had been intrigued by Chitty immediately and wanted to hear anything she had to say. "The people I have the hardest time treating are the ones I cannot imagine as a child," she said. "Because of the circumstances in which I was born and raised, I had to be a pretty adult child, and I would like at least some part of me to be a pretty childish adult. I often see the same desire in my patients." "And what about me?" Avery asked. "Can you see what kind of child I was?" Chitty nodded. "And?" Avery asked. "You dissembled," she said. "You still do." Avery could have been offended, but she was not. It was true. "And how do I stop?" she'd asked. Chitty dropped her notepad into her lap and caught Avery in her cool, still gaze. "You tell the ugly truth," she said. And she had. She had told Chitty the truth for years, long after she stopped being her patient and became her partner. That truth, that Chiti had been her therapist first, was harder on Kitty. She didn't see herself as someone who would fall in love with a client, had judged it when teachers had warned of the powerful pull of countertransference during her training course. She had stopped seeing her supervisor because of it, had spent many anguished sessions with her own therapist trying to understand why she was willing to risk her reputation, perhaps even her career, for this young American woman who had come to her office complaining of insomnia. The most unethical thing Chitty had ever done was fall in love with Avery. But she did love her. It wasn't a choice, it was the ugly truth. For 7 years, they were happy together. That first time making love, Avery had lain with her head hanging off the bed as Chetty explored the secrets of her body and let tears run backward down her face. The evening sun stretched lazily across the bed in golden bars. When Avery closed her eyes, it glowed like honey behind her eyelids. "I didn't know," she kept saying in wonder, in mourning. "I didn't know." Chiti's head appeared above her, surrounding her in the swishing, whispering folds of her hair. She was flushed rose gold. "Didn't know what, my darling?" But Avery couldn't explain it in words. She didn't know that love could feel like this, so honeyed, so sweet, that her body deserved such tenderness. They held each other as the light drained from the room, saliva and sweat cooling on their skin, and Avery felt it then, that longed-for sensation. Love, yes, but safety too. She was safe at long last. Harmony was the best word she could think of to describe their life together. They had their arguments, like any couple, but their daily life was harmonious. Their natures complemented each other. Chidi, naturally more of a nurturer, did the cooking when they ate in, took care of the garden, and made their house feel like a home. Avery, ever pragmatic, filed their taxes, paid their bills, and planned their holidays. Neither of them particularly enjoyed cleaning, so they hired a cleaning service to come every other week. Avery had previously thought love was built on large, visible gestures, but a marriage turned out to be the accrual of ordinary, almost inconsequential acts of daily devotion. Washing the mugs left in the sink before bed, taking the time to run up or downstairs to kiss each other quickly before one left the house, cutting up an extra piece of fruit to share. Acts easy to miss, but if ever gone, deeply missed. For years, Avery and Chiti prided themselves on not missing them. Then last year, Nikki died and Avery changed. She wouldn't drink over her sister's death. She knew she couldn't do that. But the grief. She didn't know how to handle the grief. It was the surprise that hurt most. She had lived her entire adult life minimizing risk to avoid being caught off guard by pain. Yet she had not protected herself from this. Avery had been in recovery for almost a decade when Nikki died. How could she not have known how deeply her sister was struggling? How could she have missed the signs? She was the big sister. It was her job not to miss things. A part of her, which she never said aloud, feared it was because she had been so busy noticing Chitti. At Nikki's funeral in New York, Avery took a book of prayers from the church. It had been years since she had stolen anything, but the feeling was the same. Her heart rate quickening, the sound of blood pumping in her ears. No thoughts but the weight of that book pressed snugly into the waistband of her black pants. When she returned to London, she kept doing it. Nothing big, a chocolate bar from the corner store, a lipstick from Boots, a pair of sneakers from the charity shop next door. Stealing from a charity shop on her salary. It was abhorrent, she knew. So she moved on to the bigger Bond Street stores, the Burberrys, Gucci's, and Chanel's. It was so much easier than when she was in her early 20s in San Francisco, stealing to get by. Now she could use a new strategy. Now she was a successful woman in her 30s, a corporate lawyer who could afford any of the beautiful goods she trailed her fingers over as she smiled knowingly at the shop assistants. She accepted flutes of champagne without taking a sip, made a show of asking for the glass cases to be opened, inspected herself in the mirror, then feigned an appointment, and, in a whirl of thanks and promises to return, made the indiscreet exit of someone with nothing to hide. All the while her purloined prize, a quilted wallet, a gold chain bracelet, an embroidered silk handkerchief, nestled snugly against her skin like an animal searching for warmth. Above her, Chidi dipped a foot into the water and winced. "You always make it too hot." "That's how I like it." Avery shifted to one side to make room for Shetty, who bobbed herself in and out of the water with a yelp. If I'm not struggling to maintain consciousness by the end, I don't consider it a real bath. Chidi finally submerged herself and rested her head against the lip of the tub. Only you could make something supposedly relaxing a fight for survival. How long have you been stewing in here? Avery raised her hand to show her pruned fingers. Chidi took it between her own and stroked along the frills of wrinkled skin. You know, they've only just proven. There's an evolutionary function to why our hands and feet do this. They have? It's to help grip underwater, like treads on a car tire. That makes sense. Avery nodded. If you think about early humans gathering in streams and rivers and things. Exactly. Or hunting in the rain. It seems so obvious now, but it's only just been proven. All this time, our bodies have been performing this miracle of intelligent design, and it's been a mystery to us. Avery smiled. But now we know. Chidi nodded. Now we know. Chidi tilted her head against the lip of the tub and exhaled. 1 whole year, she said. I'd ask how you're feeling, but I think I know. You do? Chidi gave a tired smile. 2 therapists walk into a bar, she said. You're good, says the first therapist. How am I? Avery attempted to return the smile. It was Chidi's favorite joke. Favorite, of course, because it was true. She was preternaturally empathetic, often able to read Avery's mood by how much milk she put in her coffee in the morning. She had made a profession of understanding others. But Avery didn't want to be understood right now. Not by her wife. Not by anyone. Did you go to a meeting today? Chidi asked tentatively. Avery had only just returned to AA after almost a year hiatus, and Chidi seemed not to want to jinx it. Avery shook her head. Tomorrow. Chidi nodded. I miss her too, you know, Chidi said suddenly. Right here. Chidi clutched her throat, and Avery saw her eyes were glazed with tears. I know it's important for you to experience your own feelings without competing with mine, but her voice caught. I loved her too, and I still love her every day. I just wanted you to know that.